One of my favorite things in the world to do is watch Friends. I know it's been off for years and years. It's not even around, but I still find myself binge watching old episodes. And I was thinking about this today and thinking, it's the predictability of the friends in the circle, right? You have Chandler with his quirkiness, Monica with her type A of just everything has to be so neat and tidy and organized. It's Phoebe's ability to make you laugh at her silly songs. Ross always comes in with those smart comments, and Joey and him and his food, like it is just so hilarious. And of course, Rachel, she just brings everybody together, and it's just such this beautiful, cohesive team of people. And it's why I wanted to come on and share with you today that I have an opportunity for you to find your friends in the content creation space. So if you are thinking about creating your first or your next digital course, I don't want you to miss this opportunity because Amy Porterfield just opened the doors for registration for her Course Confident Bootcamp. And I'm actually offering a special bonus for anyone that registers for the Course Confident Bootcamp through my special link. So I want you to go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register. That's crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And what you're going to find when you get there is I have this special bonus private podcast series. It's called Money Mindset for Creators. So I want you to go register for Amy's bootcamp, download the podcast, and immediately start listening to it, because what this training is set up to do is to help you get your mind right about monetizing your content, making money so that you can fuel your content creation dreams. So go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp to register for Course Confident. And I cannot wait for you to find your friends and find the people that will be there for you. Do you see what I did there? Yeah, nice little friends segue connection. Go to crystalprofit.com/Amy-bootcamp. And I cannot wait to see you inside. Okay, let's get into today's episode. So we have a question from the community today, and I love it whenever you reach out and you tell me, hey, Crystal, can you help me with this? Or this is something that I'm struggling with on my content journey, whether it's with a podcast, YouTube, or it's something that has to do with your content strategy that you really just want to improve or optimize. So I'm excited because today is about editing. We don't usually talk a lot about editing around here because I keep it pretty simple. I don't do a lot of really fancy things with my podcast editing or my video editing. I keep things pretty streamlined and basic, and that's for a reason, because I'm doing a lot of this myself. Okay, let's be honest. I'm doing all of this myself at this point, and I like to keep it very simple because it's what helps me stay consistent with my podcast content, with my YouTube content, with what I put out on all of my channels. So whenever the editing subject comes up, I do kind of hide a little bit because I'm like, ooh, that's not me. Like, I'm not the expert editor. I'm not the one that does all the shiny, sexy things with my editing. But also, I've published over 1,000 podcast episodes, and that means I know a thing or two about how to make this process easier, how to make it super consistent, and how to make it work. So let's get into today's question from Sasha. Let's get right to it. Welcome to the Profit Podcast, where we teach you how to start, launch, and market your content with confidence. I'm your host, Crystal Profit, and I'm so excited that you're here. Thanks for hanging out with me today, because if you've been trying to figure out the world of content creation, this is the show that will help be your time-saving shortcut. So let's get right to it, shall we?
Hi, Crystal. I love your podcast. I think you're wonderful and you're really inspiring. My problem is a technical one. It's the editing. I just cannot figure it out. I don't know what course to take to try to learn how to do Audacity. I have great ideas for a podcast. I've done them, but I've never gotten anything past recording them because I can't figure out the editing. So thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you so much for your questions, Sasha, and thank you for listening to the show. Like I said earlier, editing your podcast is something that podcasters have to face at some point in their journey, whether you do it yourself or you outsource it to a team of people that can help you. Editing is part of the process because even me, I've been doing this for several years. I still make mistakes. I still mess up. My dog will bark. Like somebody will come to the door and start knocking. Somebody will ring the doorbell. Kids will be screaming in the background. Like there are so many different reasons to have to implement editing in your podcast journey. But like I said earlier, I want it to be a very streamlined process where it's not something that takes you hours and hours and hours to do. I want you to go in with confidence and say, yeah, I'm going to edit my podcast today and it's going to be fun or it's going to be easy. It's going to be simple and it's not going to be overwhelming. That's the biggest piece because when people get into podcasting, they usually hit this like tech overwhelm and it's usually pretty early, especially if you're like me. I didn't have an audio like experience job before I started podcasting. So I had to learn all of these things. I had to learn, well, how do I understand which microphone to select? How do I know the difference between mono and stereo? What's a dynamic mic? What's a condenser mic? Like, what are these XLR cables and USB microphones? Like, what's all the... I have learned so many things about editing through the process that I actually came up with 7 basic editing tips that I wanted to share with you today because I think that these are the key things. Like if I look back over all the hundreds and thousands at this point of episodes that I have edited and published, what it really comes down to are 7 simple steps that I wanted to share with everyone here today, but especially you, Sasha. I hope that today's episode will give you a little bit of ease and you'll walk away knowing that, yes, there's 1,000 other fancier things you could do with your audio, but you don't have to. You don't have to do all the fancy and shiny things. You can keep it very basic, very simple, and still have a message that is very impactful for your audience. So let's get into it. Number 1, setting up your mic and adjusting the settings for your voice. This one's so crucial. It's so crucial. And it doesn't matter whether you are recording in Audacity. This is the very first editing tool I ever used. It's free, especially if you have a PC or a Mac, you can absolutely use it for free. You can still download it today and get started. It's the one that I actually recommend for people that are just beginning their journey. You could use GarageBand. If you're a Mac user, then it comes on your phone, it comes on your iPad, it comes on your Mac, like all of these places you can use GarageBand. Or if you're like me, you could use Hindenburg or Descript, which Descript is another platform that I just recently started playing around with more for video and audio. But first things first, like doesn't matter, like whatever software you use, whether it's super fancy or free, like you have to know your mic settings and the settings within your software. So I want to give you a quick story, for instance, a great example. Whenever I went from my very first microphone, which was a $20 Amazon mic that I bought way back in the day. If you're watching on the video, you can see I have it like way back here. It's on my shelf and I keep it. It's like, one of my prized possessions at this point. But it literally has no settings, none whatsoever. Like you plug it in and you go. Like it's literally a plug and play that you put it in. I plugged it in my laptop and I would just start recording. And I didn't realize until I got my Blue Yeti, which was like my next step up, is there's mics that have settings and you have to know like, well, what's the gain and which, little thing on the back of the mic do I need to adjust it to? So I recommend figuring those out, whether that's watching a YouTube video or, looking up that specific model, looking up the specs online about it, like how do I use this? How do I adjust this? But figuring those out from the beginning are crucial. Like this is actually more important than you editing or doing anything because we haven't even started recording yet, right? This is the groundwork for what you need to do. And I say this all the time. It's been a while since I said it, so I'm glad it's coming up organically in today's episode, but I still do mic checks. And it's the dumbest thing ever. And I know you're going to think I'm a super nerd when I say this, but I will say like, mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. And it's so silly. It's so stupid. I understand that, but I'm usually recording in a room by myself. So nobody else hears me when I do that, but I do a mic check before I start recording. Again, it's super basic, but you need to do this to make sure that your mic is set up for success and that your settings are right. And I want to give you one other quick story. I spent all this time recording in my closet. I will never forget because I was devastated after it happened. I was sitting on the floor of my closet because we didn't have a small table and chair to take in. I don't even know like why. I was just on the floor next to all of my dirty laundry. And I was sitting there recording a podcast episode with my Blue Yeti, right? So I had my advanced microphone that I had upgraded from my $20 mic. And I'm sitting there and I'm recording this episode and I'm so into it. I'm passionate. Like this is so good. I just knew this episode was going to change somebody's life as soon as they heard it. And then I finished and I went back and listened to it. And I had recorded on my laptop microphone. Yeah, like the one that's like right by your webcam. That's like, it was awful. The whole thing was awful because I didn't go in. I did not do a mic check. I didn't do my sound check, mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. I didn't do any of that. I just sat down and I was like, I just open up Audacity and I just hit record. I did not realize, I guess there was like some update or something that happened within Audacity, reset all the settings, and it picked my laptop mic. Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me? Like it was just devastating. So from that point on, this is why I'm sharing here with you today, like everybody listening, this is how you avoid these mistakes is sometimes you just have to make them and you learn and you're like, okay, I won't do that again. I will absolutely check my mic settings, check my software settings every single time I go to record. I literally did it today. Before I hit record, I open up Hindenburg and I'm like, okay, even if I know it's the same, every single time I check it, it is the same. It does not change. I go in and I check it because the one time that I don't is when it will have switched to, my camera instead of my podcast mic or my webcam. And so you have to check these things. So that's number one, is just setting up your microphone and your audio settings for success. Now, number two, the second basic function for editing your podcast is you have to record. So it's just simply hitting record and you start talking. Now, I know that everyone's like kind of rolling their eyes. They're like, yeah, no duh, Crystal. Like that's literally what we're here for. It's what we're doing. But at the end of the day, sometimes that's the hardest part. Whenever I had my talk at Podcast Movement, whenever we were there for Podcast Movement Evolutions in March, I talked about how having that anxiety of just hitting record, like it's a real thing. It is a real thing. Like having these nerves running through your body, you got sweaty palms and you're just kind of like, my heart is racing and like my Apple Watch thinks I'm going for a run because it's like my heart is pounding. What is going on? I'm being chased by a lion, but really it's just me hitting record and I'm supposed to start talking now. So it is a real thing. So you have to just get in there and start recording if you haven't already started recording your podcast. But then once you have something recorded, right? So now we're going to pretend that maybe you've recorded 5, 10, 15 minutes of an episode. You hit stop. Now what do? Maybe you're at the point of importing additional files, whether that is a pre-recorded audio, like your main podcast theme is what I call it, your podcast main theme, or maybe it's ads or it's interviews or it's music. Like there's so many different things that you have to do. But number 3, so we covered setting up your mic and adjusting the settings. Number 2, recording clips. Number 3 is importing additional audio clips that have already been recorded. You have to learn how to work with those on separate tracks. Now, whenever I say tracks, I'm talking about the different lines, right? Because you'll see the horizontal lines that go across the screen in your editing software. You'll notice that they break down, maybe there's 1, 2, 3, and 4 that you're looking at. Well, when you start importing tracks, you can either decide to put them all on one line, which I don't recommend. I don't recommend putting everything on one line. I actually recommend at least 2 lines. And that simply means that you have like all of your audio on the top and then underneath. Like I always put my music when I have a solo episode, all of my music goes on the second track. So right underneath, everything isn't like voice, music, everything on one. I have it on two separate ones because that allows me to overlap them and have that nice transition from one audio file to the next. All right. We're going to keep this high level. We're not going to get advanced into some of the other things that we could be doing because I have YouTube videos for that, right? I'm going to share a whole playlist with you on what you can do or what you can watch to help you with editing. But I just want to throw that out there that this is another thing that you have to learn how to do as you get going on your podcast journey. Now, number 4, this is my secret weapon. This is literally the thing that I wish I would have done 5 years ago when I first started, because it's a time saver. It is something that, it's so simple and it's so powerful. Using the zoom in and zoom out feature, but taking it a step further, if you have a mouse that has like the rolly like thing on it, I don't even know what it's called, like the scrolling like dial on your mouse, use that when you are editing. Oh my gosh, because here's a for instance of when I would use zooming in and zooming out. If I'm recording and, God forbid, I sneeze in the middle of a recording or I have a really bad tickle in my throat and I start coughing, and maybe it's one of those where like it just kind of happens and I don't pause and take like a long break. I don't hit stop. Like I just keep going. Well, if I'm listening back to something I recorded, then it might be really hard to find. So I'm listening back and then I hear like, oh, that's where I went. Made some like weird mouth noises. You know what I'm talking about. If y'all listen to this podcast, you've probably heard me at some point make some weird noises that I probably just kept in here. And you're like, you probably should have trimmed that out. But again, I don't do a ton of editing on the Profit Podcast, but here we are. But this is something when you zoom in and zoom out, you can cut those a lot cleaner and get them out of your audio. So what I will typically do is I will zoom in, right? Using my you can't see me if you're just listening to the podcast, but I'm like, zoom in, get to that clip that I want to cut out, and I'll either split it. So there's a split button whatever software you're using, there will be a split where you can hit it and it will pop it into not one track anymore, but 2. And you can kind of just cut it out by moving the cursor back and forth and adjusting it to be like, okay, I'm going to cut this entire piece right here where it's me coughing, and then I'm going to move everything back together. And in Hindenburg, you can merge the tracks back together, which makes it really easy. I'll do that, or I'll highlight it and then do a clean cut, which, if you've worked on any computers, like cut and paste is very familiar. But what it is you're just highlighting that section that you don't want to appear in your audio and you're literally cutting it out. You don't want that to be in the finished file. But zooming in and zooming out, it's the secret sauce. I'm telling you, just learn how to use your mouse in a way and things get so much faster. So if you find that little hiccup, weird noise, dog barking, whatever it is, you can catch it and then delete it a lot easier.
Being a woman in business comes with its own unique set of challenges, but also so many opportunities. We get ahead by leaning in to what makes us different from business as usual. I'm Samantha Hartley, host of Profitable Joyful Consulting, inviting you to a special 6-episode series exploring the experience of being a woman in business. You want to hear from women consultants who've hit $1 million, who sell 6-figure engagements, or who've broken their own revenue ceilings? Yeah, those are my clients, and they'll be sharing too. Join me for 6 must-listen episodes that tackle key challenges for women consultants.
Follow Profitable Joyful Consulting on your favorite podcast app.
Moving on to number 5, adjusting your sound levels. I've talked about this before. I will talk about it again. I am a very loud person. Very loud person by nature. We should have talked about this when we talked about adjusting your mic and audio settings earlier, but I don't adjust my voice to my mic in my settings. I adjust my settings to me because I've tried this before. I tried to adjust like how I speak. I tried to speak softer, especially in that very first microphone that didn't have any settings on it. I couldn't adjust the gain. I couldn't do anything. I literally would just have to move it further away from my face, like basically across the room. So I wasn't shouting into it, but I adjust my levels and I change the object, so whether that's the mic or the software, to meet who I am naturally. Because the other way did not work for me. Speaking quieter and softer and having a calmer demeanor, like that's not me. That's not me. I'm loud. I'm loud by nature. So I will adjust the levels of my audio so it's like not in the red. Because I will say that, like, I find myself in the red a lot. When I'm doing video, when I'm doing audio, I am in the red a lot. So having that basic function of knowing how to adjust your sound levels. And in most recording softwares, it's simply just grabbing like the very top of the track and lowering it down, like clicking your mouse, going and grabbing the very top, and then just scooting it down a little bit until it sounds a lot better. Now, there are other fancier ways to like grab specific areas, and like maybe you're only loud in one particular place, or, you know, you go into the red at one spot and you want to like cut it, grab it, you know, make it, you know, not as loud or whatever. Like there's so many things that you can do, but at the end of the day, just knowing how to adjust your sound levels is super helpful. Especially, this is so important. If you're recording an interview and you notice that your volume is so much louder than your guest, you need to adjust that. I was listening to, I was doing an audit of someone's podcast recently, and they asked me to go listen to a specific episode. I'll do this when I do audits, because obviously if somebody's been podcasting forever, I can't go back and listen to every episode, but I'll say, hey, I'll listen to your latest one with your guest, or I'll listen to a latest solo one. And so I was listening to one and the content was great, but there was a very, very clear difference between their audio and their guests, and it makes it really hard to follow along because it's almost like I need to adjust my phone, right? Like I'm walking on my podcast, listen to it, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I can't hear them. Okay, so I turn it up, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, the other person's back on, and I have to turn it way back down. Like your audience isn't going to do that for a full 45 minutes. Like it's not going to happen. So you want to make sure that everything is level, and you can do that in your audio recording software. All right, number 6. We kind of covered some of these earlier, but we're going to go back over them again. And that's cutting, splitting, and deleting clips of audio. Now, again, most of you will probably be listening to this and not watching the video version. So I don't want to go into a whole, explanation of how you cut and split and delete everything in your audio system, but you need to know how to do this because, again, I'm not perfect. I've been doing this for over 5 years at this point, and I still make mistakes. I still have to make cuts. I still have to delete things. I split things all the time, especially when I mess something up. In the middle, I'll say something, and then I realize, oh, I said that wrong, or I said it funny. So I will take a pause. This is key. Take a 2 to 3 second pause like this. Okay, I know that's really awkward, like while you're sitting here listening to it, but that's what I will do when I am editing. I'll mess up and then I do this pause. And then when I'm looking at my WAV file, right, I'm looking at the waveform in my audio software, I can see like, oh, why is there a hole? Like there's a hole in the audio and there's nothing there. Oh, that's where I messed up. So I can hone in, again, use my quick zoom in and out feature and look at that particular place and say, oh, okay, like this is the part where I messed up. So I need to re-listen to it, find that piece that doesn't need to be in there, cut it, split it, delete it, whatever I need to do. And that's how I will edit my episodes whenever I mess up. I have other friends that tell me when they record that they'll clap, they'll go, Or that was kind of a weak clap. I'm trying to clap where it's loud. My kids, do your kids do this? They have this like technique where they clap and it's so loud, like it hurts my ears. They'll do it when we go to like a game and they're like, you're supposed to applaud, and it's so loud right next to me. And I was just attempting to do that, and it was like the saddest thing ever. I'm so glad they're not here. They'd be like, bro, that's not cool. They're 13 and 10, so they call me bruh. But so listen, much better, right? That sound on an audio file will shoot straight up, like it goes into the red. And what that does is you can identify that as a place where you messed up. So I'll have friends that will pause and they'll clap, and that indicates to them, if they're editing, or their editor, hey, this is where I made a mistake. Like, go fix it and make the changes. All right, number 7, we're rounding out for the 7 basic editing tips that you need to know. And this is saving and exporting files. Now, when it comes to saving and exporting, you may or may not know this, but you cannot upload a Hindenburg file, an Audacity file, a GarageBand file into your podcast host. This is Buzzsprout for me. You have to actually create a waveform, an MP3, another type of audio file that a podcast host will take. And for me, I typically use a waveform. This is what I've done from the beginning. There's really no other rhyme or reason other than it's what I've done forever. It does take up a little bit more space. MP3s tend to be smaller files whenever they're exported, but I think that Wave is a little bit higher quality. So there's really no other like secret sauce or magic trick behind that. It's just my preference. And so I will save things and export them, and then they're ready to go. So those are my 7 editing tips to share with you today. I hope that this was helpful. I know, like I said earlier, it's probably easier to hear these things, Sasha, on a video and watch step-by-step of how I do it. So I wanted to share with you, I have a playlist on YouTube that is all about podcast editing. So I want you to go check it out. There's going to be a link in the show notes where you're listening to this. And I want you to go check it out because it will have Audacity tips as well as Hindenburg. So if somebody's listening to this and you use either one of those platforms, then they will be super, super helpful. But thank you so much, Sasha, for your question today. And if you want to be featured on the Profit Podcast, make sure you go to podinbox.com/the Profit Podcast and submit your question to be answered here on the show. But that's all I have for you today. So make sure you're following the podcast and subscribed wherever you are listening. And as always, remember, keep it up. We all have to start somewhere. Hey, Profit Podcast listeners, thanks for sticking around to a little bit after the episode to hear this special message, because I want to hear from you. We are starting a new segment called Fan Mail Shoutouts, and I want to hear from you, and I want to hear your questions. What do you want to know? What questions have you been dying to ask me? So here's how to make this happen. Go to the app where you're listening to this podcast right now. Go there. I'll wait a second. Okay. Now, once you're there, you're going to see a hyperlink at the top of the episode description that says, send Crystal a text message. And that's all I want you to do. Send me a text. It could be casual, informal. It could be totally anonymous. Or if you want, you can include your name and the name of your podcast or content wherever you are creating, and I will give you a special shout out in an upcoming episode. So again, go to the show notes for where you're listening to this episode right now, and it will say, send Crystal a text message. And I cannot wait to hear from you and give you a shout out in an upcoming segment of Fan Mail Shoutouts.